I just keep trying to get this camera to line up. The lines behind me are driving me batty. It's podcast day. It's podcast day. Hello, friends. Mars here. Thank you so much for coming by for another episode of the heyBrownBerry Knitting Podcast. I'm Mars. You are very welcome here. I was sitting here working on a project and once again felt like, hey, this is something I'd love to share with my friends on YouTube. That's you. So I thought I would just record an episode without too much pre-planning. What else is new? On this podcast, I typically talk about knitting, some spinning, every now and then some crochet and other forms of making. This time around, I have a few new to me things that have come home with me or arrived in the mail that I thought you might like to see as well. So I'm going to be sharing as much of that with you today as I can. It's a beautiful day here in South Florida. I'm actually sitting in my guest room / craft room, definitely more of a craft room. And in this room, I am able to see outside to our backyard. The light is usually really good in here. So it makes it a comfy spot for anything really. Stitching. I like to sit in here and knit sometimes. I like to nap right on this futon. I do some sewing, so at times when I need to cut out fabric and other things, I do that in here. So it's a comfortable setup that lets me have some space for all of my materials and supplies. How are you? Are you well? Let me know in the comments how you're doing right now. I've been having such a good time reading the comments from many of you. If you're not already aware, I'm taking part in the Spin and Make Along. This is a really fun adventure, and it's being hosted by Mina of the Knitting Expat podcast and Grace of the Babbles Traveling Yarn podcast. I will link their information below, and I will also put the hashtag right across the screen here for the Spin and Make Along 2019. I have put out some vlogs, just a short series of smaller episodes that are taking you through the process of my spinning portion of that make along. And both Mina and Grace have put out some great material as well for that, and they're making such a huge effort to bring everybody together that I'm having a great time meeting new people who spin. So I guess we're just diving right in today, and we're going to start with spinning because why not? I am a hand spinner. I spindle spin. I do not currently own a wheel. I have used a wheel before, thanks to my friend Natalie. She helped me kind of get comfortable with using a wheel for plying when we were visiting each other at one point last year. So as part of the Spin and Make Along, if you watch the vlogs, you'll see some of my process going into fiber prep and then spinning. I also covered some of my spindles, so I won't cover that here. But I will show you some finished hand spun. This is my probably 8th or 9th yarn of any form since I started spinning, and I consider this finished because my aim was to make a 2-ply yarn, and I was figuring it would turn out to be about a about a DK or a worsted weight. So I'm really happy with how this came out. There's more detail on the fiber that I used in those spinning vlogs, and you'll see the different colors that I mixed. And I did this on some of the spindles that I've had for quite a while. The spinning of the singles for this was actually more enjoyable than the plying, and that's because when I went to make it a 2-ply, I kind of did it all in one session, and plying can be really hard on the body. It can really take a lot out of your shoulders, and I was being stubborn because I really wanted it done. So anyway, finished spinning it, I finished plying it. It is about 80 grams or 147 yards, like I said, between DK and worsted. And I had pre-drafted the fiber, and this fiber is amazing. The Spincycle Yarns company out in Washington State does sell fiber for spinning. I've got some up there. That red and brown package there has some of their fiber in it, and I highly recommend it. It's actually a blend of American wools. I'll put the information on the screen of the different wools that are in it. I'm going to try my best. I know that there's some Columbia in there. There is some Rambouillet, and I believe the rest of it is Corriedale. Either way, the accurate information about this blend will be on the screen. Very happy with this, and actually Mina and Grace announced on an Instagram Live the other day that instead of waiting for opening up the making portion of the Spin and Make Along, we're going to do that from now if you like. So if you're considering this make along or you're already part of it, just know that you can spin and start making right away. I have some thoughts about this. When you guys look at this, I would love to know what you think of when you see this yarn. I'm considering color work at the top of a sweater, or even just putting it into the yoke of an otherwise plain colored sweater. I've considered a woolly wormhead hat. Woolly wormhead is my absolute favorite designer. She designs the most gorgeous hats of all different styles. I've considered hand warmers. It is 147 yards, and it is, you know, a fairly decent weight. So I have options. I'd love to know what you'd suggest. And now that the making portion has started, I'm really anxious to cast it on. So I had fun with that. Still on the fiber front, I actually was inspired by this activity and by some of what I've seen in the Ravelry threads to get out some hand spun that I had spun before. I have some Tunis, American Tunis fiber, which is from Tar Heel Billy Farmer. I talk about this on my Instagram page as well. They're a Black-owned farm, and this Tunis fiber was brand new to me. I actually had not heard of them before. I'm just going to reach for some of the raw fiber. Okay, this is the Tunis fiber as it was when I ordered it, plus some avocado dye. I am a natural dyer, enthusiastic beginner as a natural dyer. You can see the pink shades that are very common for avocado dye. And this is some roving that I used my avocado dye stock on. And then the other day I was inspired to pull out some of the hand spun Tunis from that fiber and over dye it. I've started collecting dye materials in my freezer, like avocado pits and peels, pomegranate skins. As they become food waste, I've been keeping them there so that I can use them when I get ready to dye again. And I wanted to see what would happen if I took some skeins of Tunis that I spun and had dyed with avocado and over dyed them. The color of naturally dyed yarn just, it shifts so much depending on the light. I mean, you can see some of the pink undertones still come through. And if I just hold it back here, that's pretty accurate. It's actually a lot more peach brown right now. It's actually very much in the golden kind of light rusty brown family. I'll see if I can give you a close-up view by switching the camera. Yeah, I'm getting to that point where my hand spun has enough yardage in it after a good few sessions of spinning that I can then start to plot projects, that's fun. It's like part 2 of the good time. Let's stay on the yarn train for a little bit. I wanted to talk to you about a couple of knit-alongs and make-alongs that I have going on in my heyBrownBerry and Friends Ravelry group. I hope that you're a member over there. If not, I highly encourage that you join us because it is a wonderfully positive, encouraging group of folks from all over the world. And many of them are participating in some of those make-alongs. I have started one for the Ritual Shawl, which is my second ever publicly released pattern. I talked about the Ritual Shawl in depth in a couple of episodes ago, and I thought it would be great to have a knit along for those who have purchased the pattern and cast it on. I'm a fan of making along together. I like joining in make-alongs. I like starting them. I like the accountability that comes with participating in them. So the Ritual Shawl make-along is running now. I'll put information about it either on the screen or in the description box. And obviously I had my first Ritual Shawl that was used for pattern photos and to promote the pattern when it originally came out. If you search the hashtag Ritual Shawl on Instagram, you'll see that as well as many others that are in progress and completed that are just gorgeous. It's a triangular shawl with a knitted on lace border, and it really encourages play with color. You can use 1, 2, or 3, even 4 different colors if you like, according to the way the pattern is written. And I am ready for my next one. My next Ritual Shawl, I'm looking around because I've got all 3 skeins that I plan to use. One of them is in this room and I have to go grab it. My second Ritual Shawl is going to be knit in the Fiber Seed Sprout DK. So I'm going with 3 colors, these 3. The original shawl was also, I also used the Fiber Seed Sprout DK for one of the yarns, and my friend Lindsay is the dyer behind these yarns. I am such a huge fan. I intend to use all 3 in the body and border of this shawl. And I'm really excited to cast that on. I've already caked up the color that I intend to start with first. I've caked up the color that I plan to start with first. I'm pretty sure I want to use this mixed color in the middle and then this one on the border. I'll give you the yarn details in just a moment, but this is the Fiber Seed Sprout DK. So it's probably easier for you to see the colors here. This one is Polar Vortex, Gulfstream, and I have the label for the 3rd color. I'll put the information on the screen for that one. Sincere apologies if this seems a little disjointed, guys. I try not to wait until absolutely everything is perfect in order to podcast because then it will be too long between our visits. So appreciate your patience. Those are the 3 yarns I'll be casting on for my Ritual Shawl, and I do hope you'll join us. If you'd like to see what it looks like, you can find the Ritual Shawl on Ravelry, and also if you use the hashtag Ritual Shawl Cal on Instagram, you'll see what others are making. You have plenty of time to join us, and I hope you will. Next up, I want to share with you another unboxing. I'm actually finding it really fun to open things for the first time when I'm recording. I usually have an idea of what is coming in the mail, so it's not so much that it's a surprise, it's just that I get to share that moment with you of seeing something in real life for the first time. And this time it's something that was somewhat new to me. I was familiar with the company We Are Knitters. That's their brand name there. I was familiar with the concept of We Are Knitters, which is they provide kits, knitting and crochet kits, and they sell these as project kits, if you like, with all the things you need in order to make the project. So the yarn, crochet hook or knitting needles, any other notions that you might need, We Are Knitters provides them in this kit form. They reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to try one of the kits and give my honest opinion, and I very gratefully said, sure. Now, I'm finding that if given the opportunity, I would do all the things all the time. But of course, that's not logical. Logic does not always prevail. So when considering this, I actually took my time before saying, yes, please send me a kit, to think about what kind of project I'd want to work on and what would I dig into that would allow me to give you all a really good idea of my thoughts on the kit format, the yarn, the project and pattern. And what I came up with was, why not do a crochet project? This is a crochet top called Vere Tee, and I love the idea of everything you need being well packaged and put together. I think just the concept is pretty cool. So I want to open this and share with you what's inside. So on the bag it says, "We are knitters, all the happiness in a kit." First of all, I love this kind, almost like, I'm gonna hold it this way so it doesn't have too much glare. I love this almost lunch bag style paper bag that it comes in. It's very tidy, and it's also really convenient for keeping everything in there. I chose the Vere Tee one because it was crochet. I am a crocheter, and I have made one garment before. I've made hats, and I really enjoy crochet. I've done a couple of blankets as well, so I find it very fast, I find it very soothing, and I'm open to the idea of learning more about crochet garment making. I haven't done that much. That's one of the reasons I picked this. And then I went on and saw the yarn options for this project. Now, the light is going to give you a much more saturated, view of this yarn. So what I'll do is I'll insert some video as I'm talking about it. This is called the cotton. It's 100% Peruvian Pima cotton, and each ball has 3.5 ounces in 100 grams, and that equates to 232 yards. I chose this color called terracotta because I really love it as a color against my skin tone. I think jewel tones, the deeper tone colors really speak to me, so that was part of the appeal. For a t-shirt, especially here where I live, I think it's going to be an item I wear a lot, and it looks also like something that once I've made one, if I really like the style and the fit and the pattern, it would be a great thing to add to my wardrobe in a couple of colors. So you get the yarn with the kit. You also get this little packet, which has some really fun stickers. I'm going to put that on my notebooks. The Vere Tee pattern. I won't give away too much there. From a size perspective, they have in centimeter and inch measurements for the full length of the garment, as well as the bust measurement. So it's a good thing for you if you may need to do some adjustment because your chest to torso proportion is something you want to modify for fit. So I'm actually going to look to see, as I'm reviewing this, how that sort of measures up and how it all aligns. So the pattern is there, and this is the first time I'm looking into this, so I'm seeing the goodies for the first time with you. There's a really cool, proudly handmade by myself, stitch on label. As long as I cover my face, you guys can see. As well as a darning needle for sewing up your ends. Very handy. I You'll be seeing some video of these items as I pull them out. This is the crochet hook that came with it. The crochet hook I chose, or that comes with this, is a 5mm or size 8 US or size 6 UK crochet hook. It's wood and it looks nice. It actually looks really smooth. I haven't taken it out of the packaging yet, obviously, but it looks pretty smooth. I'm really excited to see how it is in the hand, because I have different types of crochet hooks. I have some ergonomic ones that have a little bit of the rubbery texture on the side that you hold, which is pretty comfortable in the fingers. I have some other wooden ones that I really love to use. They are, you know, handcrafted, really nicely smooth. So this one, I think it'll work well. It's actually really, really light, which is, I think, a good thing. For my size, according to the measurements I was able to preview, I've got 5 bowls of the yarn. I'm really excited to use it. It feels really nice. I've used Pima cotton before, but they're all a little bit different. This one feels very soft, very smooth. In the skein, it doesn't look to be very splitty, which is really important. So I'm hoping that that's actually the case as I work with it. As I go on this project, I am going to keep you updated. I think it's very, very generous of We Are Knitters to give me the chance to try this out. I'm pretty proud of myself, I must say, for picking something practical and not just for the sake of a new to me yarn, but because I think the finished product is something that that I will wear, and I will share with you my honest opinion of it. Have any of you knit from a kit before? That's also pretty new to me, where you get everything together. It's kind of all put together for you. I'm not nervous about that in any way. I just think it's really convenient. I really like that some of the thought has already been put into what you might need, so I could literally pick up this bag and know that I have everything I need for the project. So, other than maybe a tape measure and some scissors. So I'll keep you posted on how I go with that kit. In the summer, summer for us in the Northern Hemisphere, often some time may open up. I know that not many of us have different work schedules in the summer than any other time of the year, but summer seems to be the time when we plan different activities, and we might do a bit more, we might carve out a bit more downtime. That's been my experience. This year I have 2 daughters, and this year I have some milestones coming up. In the fall, my youngest daughter will start her senior year in high school. That's Meezy. And hi, Meezy, if you're watching. And my oldest daughter, Adachi, hey, sweetheart, she will be starting university. Both of those things will happen in August of this year. So the time between now, end of May, and about mid-August is, it's pretty packed up with activities for us as a family. Part of that will include some road trips. I'm fortunate that I can actually read in the car. So road trips have really opened up time for me. So I thought I'd share with you some of the books that I have and have recently decided I want to get read over the summer. This first one is called Pakistan for Women. This book is by the artist Maliha Abidi. And I think, bless the Instagram algorithm that introduced me to this artist, Maliha. She's a painter and an illustrator, and she had a Kickstarter for this book earlier in the year, which I found through Kate O'Sullivan, and online. My friend online and in real life, Kate O'Sullivan, I think she had copied this Kickstarter information into her Instagram about this upcoming book, and I was just so intrigued by the topic itself, which is stories of women who have achieved something extraordinary. And I'll admit, I don't know a lot about Pakistani culture. I don't know a lot of artists from that region, but I was immediately drawn in by Maliha's skill. And so the book does, as it says, it features extraordinary women with illustrations by Maliha. and a summary of that woman's story. I love a book like this. It's modular in a way. I can really dive in and absorb one story at a time. And then I can just enjoy the artwork, the detail of the illustrations, which Maliha has clearly spent some significant time working on. The Kickstarter obviously was funded, and the book is now in print and it is available. I'll make sure you have the information for it. But the colors, the stories, and the inspiration, I'm so looking forward to diving into this more. I'll read from the back of the book. It says, Pakistan for Women is a storybook based on more than 50 real women who have achieved something extraordinary. It is important for us to celebrate our women in order to inspire, to empower the current and upcoming generations. It is the first book of its kind to be published in Pakistan. I found that pretty compelling. So this will be one of my summer companions for sure. A couple other books I actually found at a thrift store that's pretty local to me. And these are fiction books by a couple of authors that I love. Now you can see by their thickness, these are going to be an adventure. This one by Ken Follett, The Fall of Giants, is book 1 of the Century trilogy. You may be familiar with Ken Follett. He's a pretty well-known, at least in North America, he's a pretty well-known author. He also wrote The Winds of War, and there are other books in this trilogy, and I believe he has another trilogy. Pillars of the Earth is one of his well-known books. And at a certain time in my life, I would have found a book like this very intimidating. But what I've decided is I'm just going to make time for this kind of reading, and I'm going to be okay with the fact that maybe I only get through a few pages or part of a chapter at a time. But I got this at my local thrift store, and it turns out that the woman at the counter put these together with the other items I had, and she just decided to kindly give them to me for free. This one and the second one by Maeve Binchy. It's called Evening Glass. Maeve Binchy is a British author that I've been in love with for a couple of decades now. She wrote the book The Circle of Friends, which was the first one of hers that I read. And she has a gift for storytelling when it comes to small villages and towns and the people that make up those areas and their stories and how their stories are interconnected. I fall in love with the characters every time. I miss them when the book is over. She's really good at a plot twist, and she does things like romance and relationships in a way that's not, I guess, sickeningly sweet, but still sweet. And the description of the landscapes in places like Ireland are incredible. So I got both of these for free from that thrift store run, which pleases me to no end. I would happily have paid for them. They were 49 cents each. I would happily have paid for them. But yeah, those are books that I'm going to be working my way through over the summer. If you don't already know, there is a hashtag, Bookish Knitters, and it's a hashtag that was, I believe it was started by Louise Tilbrook. She's Louise Tilbrook Designs on Instagram. I signed up to that, or to use that hashtag, and then signed up to the Goodreads group for Bookish Knitters because I always love a good recommendation. Quick poll. Do you typically read books based on recommendation, or are you more likely to just give something a try, give an author or a story type a try? My answer is I almost always go on recommendation, and then if I find an author that I like, I tend to read just about everything they've written. For some reason, with books and Netflix shows, I'm not very adventurous. I'm not keen to just turn something on or grab a book from the library and give it a try. I don't know. Weird quirk. So these are authors I'm familiar with, and I have an idea of their writing style. I'm sure at some point, it was my first try for that author, but it was maybe based on them being compared to another author I know, or someone actually saying, hey, I think you would like this. My friends are great about doing that. So the Bookish Knitters group on Goodreads and the Bookish Knitters hashtag on Instagram is a great way to connect with other makers who also love to read. Carrying on with that theme of knitting and reading, I've got a needle adjacent project. A needle adjacent project for me means I have the yarn, I've got the idea, and I've got the motivation, I just haven't cast on yet. So I have the distinct pleasure of sampling some Cartref yarn. Cartref Yarn is a new Welsh yarn brand run by my friends Jenny and Zoe. Hi, ladies. I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Zoe on a recent Instagram live, and this yarn is a gorgeous DK weight Welsh wool. I'm going to try this out because I was gratefully given the opportunity to do so, but I can tell you, I'm already in love with it. It's now available online in the Cartref Yarn Etsy shop, and I have the pleasure of trying out these three colors, which are Naturiol, which is the natural undyed wool. Actually, let me switch up here so you can see these better. There we go. From Farm to Yarn in Wales, Cartref Yarn, and my samples are in Naturiol, Sapphire, and Glor. I'm saying those names as best I can. So I love this combination. The natural undyed yarn gives you an idea of the base, sort of a heathered, slightly tan, slightly gray, and then these colors dyed over it complement that base so well. So these three skeins are going to become a special project. My plan is to use the three skeins in a single project, and what better for multicolor yarn use than color work? My local library has some of the best making book selection I have ever seen. So I got this book, 200 Fair Isle Motifs, A Knitter's Directory by Mary Jane Mucklestone, from the library. I'm knitting along with my friend Lee, and I decided to get some inspiration from this book of motifs so that I could create a pair of colorwork mitts from these three colors. It's really hard to choose from all the options in this book, but I was able to narrow it down to something I think will highlight all three colors quite well, and it's this one. It's just choice number 1, 2, 3. See it here. It is a 3-color pattern, which works well for what I have. And I also think this motif is compact but interesting enough that I could use it more than once in a set of colorwork mitts. So that's my current plan. I may do them with a provisional cast on so that I can be very careful about how much yardage gets used. They might be mini hand warmers, we'll see. I'm looking forward to working with that yarn, and because they'll be hand warmers, I think it would give me an opportunity to talk about how well the yarn wears. Another make-along that's happening in the heyBrownBerry group is the Finally Fix It make-along. I did a short video on this channel talking about some of the details of the Finally Fix It make-along. Your best bet is to head on over to the Ravelry group and see the information, but put simply, it's for pulling out those projects that have been languishing because there's something you need to tweak or fix or undo and redo, and maybe you've been putting it off. Well, it's time to finally fix it. I have stacked up projects like socks that need to be darned and sweaters that are just not quite well sized, and I'm just chipping away at them one at a time. This morning I actually spent some time with my Beyond Measure darning egg. I love this thing so much. This Beyond Measure darning egg is one that I bought when I was at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. It has 2 pieces that you can open up, and inside there's a thread spool and a clever little needle holder. I'm going to insert some video here of using this darning egg for doing some duplicate stitching on a pair of mitts that I made. I basically refashioned a pair of socks into a set of hand warmers. And I'll put the video in so you can see some of the techniques I used for that final fix. I'm turning my Bridget's Garden socks pattern into hand warmers. I know that may sound a little strange, but these socks have the most beautiful colorwork patterning, and they were designed by Natalie of Remembrances Pottery, who's a very dear friend of mine. I hadn't done colorwork socks before this project, and I'm actually pretty proud of how the colorwork knitting itself came out. But I ran into some problems with the fit across the top of my ankle, and I was able to address some of that with blocking, but I still had a bit of tightness in that area. This is an afterthought heel sock where you put in a waste yarn and cut in the heel. I finally figured out a good way to do the heel and was able to get that to fit well, but I still had that tightness across this section. And colorwork does tend to require a larger than usual needle size. It tends to require a bit of, you have to account for the density of the colorwork. So after much consideration, I decided to turn these socks into hand warmers. What you're looking at here is actually the area where I would have had toes if these were socks. And instead, I've added in just over 1 inch of ribbing. This is the original ribbing for the socks. They're knit cuff down. And what I've decided to do is, on this sock in particular, I had already done a heel. I had cut in the heel, and as I said, the fit wasn't quite right. So in order to turn this into a hand warmer, I actually did some Kitchener stitch here, and it's not the most tidy, but I cut the heel out, as you saw in a previous clip, and I Kitchener stitched this top portion and bottom portion together. So now I can slide my hand in, and there's no space. I still have ends to weave in. There's no space there because it's been seamed across. The other sock suffered a bit more with my distraction. If you see this pink line here, that's cotton waste yarn. The intent was for me to be able to cut that waste yarn and put in a heel. If you notice, the pattern is meant to show these beautiful alternating lines, the center of which continues in the top leg part of the original pattern. On this one, my center line is on this side of the sock, and my alternating lines are on this side. In short, I put my waste yarn in the wrong area, and the whole bottom portion of the sock, I knit the chart incorrectly. You can see where these lines here were meant to match up with these lines here. I have no explanation for how that happened. It's been a while since I picked these up, and I'm not really sure how I missed that. The pattern is very well written, so I think it's down to my inexperience. What I intend to do here is I'm going to cut these two pieces of the sock apart and essentially rotate this part around so that it matches up with the alternating lines the same way that you see here. Because this is wool yarn, I'm not concerned about dropping stitches, but I am going to be careful to hold the stitches on a spare needle as I go around. And then I'm hoping I can rotate this, line it up, and Kitchener stitch it again. This will be the portion of the arm warmer that goes toward my elbow. And this purple rib will be for my hands. My thought right now, so as not to disrupt this beautiful floral pattern, is I may cut in a thumb hole right on this line. Essentially, if I steek a hole opening here, I can put my thumb through. So first I'll reinforce the stitches alongside where I intend to cut, and then just snip out these stitches in the center. Wish me luck! The area I showed, the outside area that had this cotton waste yarn, is one that I'm going to try to restitch or stitch over with this yarn from the rest of the project. So far what I'm doing is essentially a method of duplicate stitching. So I'm following the path of the pink cotton yarn with this green yarn instead, using my darning needle. And it's working out pretty well. When I look at the outside, I was going along working the duplicate stitch from the inside, and then I missed a couple of stitches and it was making it very untidy. So I've switched now to move to duplicate stitching from the right side. And actually I thought it might be useful to take my little darning egg. There's a thread spool, there are darning needles in here, and the egg itself is a great surface to use for darning and repairs and mending. And in this case, I'm going to stick it inside my project here. Having the darning egg inside gives me a nice steady surface, so I can trace these stitches using the green yarn to go over each of the pink stitches. It's actually a nice guideline. I probably have a little more thread on my darning needle than I need, but I would hate to run out as I'm going across this row. Have you tried a darning egg for duplicate stitching or mending? I'd love to hear about it. When it's just stuck in it, it's a pretty rhythmic pattern. The same movements for each stitch. And I realize now that I'm doing it from the right side, I can control the tension of each stitch a little bit better so that I don't have some that are too tight and puckering or some that are too loose and sticking out. Like most of you, I have several different darning needles that I use. This one is curved. That's been working really well for getting underneath the stitches. Because this is a proper wool, non-superwash It is pretty grabby. That's actually working to my advantage for this. Even though I have to give it a little tug every now and then. So I like how that's working out. Some of the unevenness will settle out in blocking. My next fix is to rescue this pair of socks. These are some of my favorite socks I've knit. They're made out of an Australian wool that was gifted to me by my friend Rowena. And then I also added some contrasting toes out of a mystery black wool that I was given in a swap. Well, the all wool toes have worn out. And so I've started some woven patch repairs. Now I don't mind that this is a bright neon yellow because it's on the bottom of my foot, but I'm pretty proud of the fact that it's made with some of my finest hand spun. This is some of the finest hand spun I've made to date, and it's really strong. It's worsted spun, and it's, I think the fiber was Corriedale, but either way, it's like very strong reinforcement thread. And so I'm using that to patch up some holes that have come in on the toes. This one was out of control already. This one, I think I'll be rescuing it just in time. The hole that I noticed is still fairly small. You can just see my finger peeking out there. Thankfully, the heels have held up well. This is a standard heel flap and gusset construction. So if anything, I'm just going to keep an eye on them so that I can darn them as needed before it gets too far out of hand. But just in the feel before washing these another time, I think this handspun is going to hold up really well for that fix. So come join us in the Ravelry group if you have something you'd like to fix or revamp, resize, frog, and repurpose. We'd be happy to have you. Just a couple more things I want to talk about, and actually it's related. Actually, talking about repurposing made me realize that there's a bit of a connection here as well. I went to the thrift store where I got the books that I showed you, and I specifically went with the intention of finding an all-natural fiber sweater that I could rip and repurpose. And by repurpose, I mean unravel, take the yarn, and potentially either just soak it so that it would straighten out again and knit with it, or soak it, re-dye it, and then knit with it. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I found this sweater, my thrift shop trip yesterday. Here's one panel. This is the back panel. I've already unraveled both sleeves and the front panel. As you can see, it's a cable motif sweater. And I did the burn test on this sweater, and the burn test is something you can Google and find online. You use that test to see the characteristics of how a strand of the yarn burns, and based on the way the flame shows up, if there is one, based on the smell that comes from the burning piece of yarn, based on how the fibers are after they've been burned and the feel of that, you can tell if an item is all or mostly animal fiber versus, for example, an acrylic or a synthetic fiber. So I did the burn test, and this is 100% wool. I actually did that test before unraveling the sweater because I thought if it's not 100% wool, that was not what I was looking for. So I was actually willing to either gift the sweater or return it to the Goodwill for someone to wear it. But I was pretty happy when the burn test showed that it is an animal fiber. From what I can tell, it is just simply a wool. It doesn't seem to have an alpaca blended in or anything like that. So I've been unraveling it onto my nitty knotty. This is something I've done in the past. So I'm very familiar with the process of how to unpick the stitches, but there's great YouTube tutorial videos on how to unravel a store-bought sweater that has been hand knit. There are telltale signs when a sweater is machine knit. In particular, there's serger stitching along the seams, which means the yarns have all been cut in order to piece together that item. So you would just essentially get a lot of short strands of yarn. But you can tell a hand knit sweater that's been seamed together or knit all in one piece if you don't see those telltale serger marks. And this was one such sweater. So it is now mounds of yarn spaghetti. I am almost done. And because this was a cable sweater, this is actually a lot of yardage. I'm really excited about that. The sweater cost me $4.59, $4 US and 59 cents. And I haven't weighed it yet, but there's got to be a few hundred grams in here. So I'm going to soak that once I finished unwinding it all. Let me get closer. So once I finished unraveling it all, I'm at the point now with this piece where I'm just pulling it straight off the sweater and winding it onto the nitty knotty. And once I finish doing that for this last piece, I'll put everything to soak together. I want to see if the color that's in here, this pale teal, a very light, almost robin's egg blue, I want to see if any of that color comes out. If it doesn't, I intend to over dye it with some lichen, a very light diluted lichen natural dye. The last time I dyed lichen, I got a gorgeous yellow color. You can see it here, a really deep yellow. And I'm thinking the combination of that with this light blue will just make a really interesting green. My daughter and I talked about it yesterday, and we thought maybe a purple or a lilac would work well, but in order for me to achieve that right now, I would use acid dyes to do that, so synthetic dye powder. And I kind of like the idea of doing a lichen bath and doing it as a natural over dye. So I will very likely post pictures on Instagram of that process, or at least the outcome. And yeah, I'm pretty happy. My thrift store haul was great. I also got this sweater, which is two-toned, 3 actually, of a yarn that I believe to be natural fiber. It's got quite a halo on it. It is very likely a blend with either Angora or alpaca, and I'm going to assume some wool. It's not so drapey to make me think that it's all a camelid family like alpaca or llama. It does have some of the structure of a wool. I'm going to do the burn test on it. It's a pretty sweater, don't get me wrong. This is obviously not my size, but it's a pretty sweater in and of itself. I purposely purchased this for the idea of having an affordable yarn that I could reuse. I'm not sure that I will over dye this. I think the colors are great. I may just reclaim the yarn. Let me know if you're interested in trying something like that, reclaiming some yarn or repurposing it in that way. That wraps up my sharing for this time around, friends. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of the podcast. You can find me everywhere as heyBrownBerry, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like button. If you'd like to know when my videos are released, you can hit the subscribe button and even tap the little bell so you get a notification that I've got a new episode or vlog or short out. I will see you again very soon. Thanks for being here. Mwah.